Welcome to Morlock Me, the weekly podcast where we discuss books and their cinematic adaptations. My name is Charlie.
And I'm Michael. Hello.
And this week we'll be discussing the Michael Lewis and Adam McKay sort of film, which is The Big Short. And I always talk first. I feel I should let you talk first as well, but I don't know. I sort of threw you in the deep end last time, so I'm going to throw you in the deep end again. And I'm going to talk to you about it first and say, what did you think, Michael?
Okay, thank you again. You're so kind to me. So basically the book, a lot of it went over my head and made me feel very stupid. And then the film kind of took that feeling away. It does it really cleverly in that Ryan Gosling's character, who is Jack Bennett, sort of prefaces the film by coming in and saying, basically, if you don't understand this, you're not alone. Most of the financial sector did not understand this. And so that makes you feel a lot better. And I feel like there are a lot of similes and metaphors that the book uses that don't quite work, whereas in the film they use better ones, if that's fair.
Yeah, I after reading The Big Short, the book, I had to sit down and lie down in a dark area because it hurt my brain very much. Because the problem is it's discussing Wall Street, and Wall Street is just difficult on its own, like stocks and shares and bonds and stuff. I'm not very mathematically gifted. So to try and understand it when you're reading the book, it's very, very difficult to understand because it's written basically from the sort of point of view of the Wall Street investors and the Wall Street people, and Michael Lewis is writing sort of basically he's getting his information from the Wall Street investors and the people who feature in the book and in the film. And so it's not really written, sort of like, this is my interpretation of it, or this is how I'm done. He's done it sort of straight from the horse's mouth, essentially. So that's why it's really difficult to understand it, because the book is very Wall Street. It's very, this is how it works. This is what it's doing. This is, how it works in the system. Whereas sort of mere mortals like ourselves, it's very, very difficult to understand it. And I found it very difficult to sort of keep up with the book, to sort of keep going with it, to understand it. I did have to put it down a few times because as much as it's very interesting, you do learn and, you sort of experience a bit more about the others. Well, sort of, because I think from what we've sort of seen of Wall Street, it's been like the Wall Street films, or it's been the Wolf of Wall Street, or, that's kind of what, from sort of my viewing figuring, sort of I've only seen that side of it. So you sort of only see the sort of fun lifestyle, maybe the dangerous side of it, but just kind of the sort of fun, energetic side of it, whereas this takes sort of more the other side of it, of the risks and basically what, how people are, that they'll make fun of you for placing the bet on the wrong horse, so to speak. And it's just I found the films much easier to understand. I think mainly because obviously the script writers and Adam McKay has obviously directed it, must have just looked at the book and gone, how on earth are we going to put that into film? I don't know if that's the same feeling.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because it does do some very interesting things with how it gets things across. So there are various cutaways that Jared Bennett gives to the audience, and they cut away to Margot Robbie in a bathtub. They cut away to Anthony Bourdain, who's a famous chef, explaining the metaphor of how a CDO works with bad fish, and Selena Gomez and Richard Haythala on a blackjack table. And the way that they present it makes it very easy because it puts it into metaphors that we can understand. Whereas in the book, Michael Lewis, his metaphors only extend as far as the housing market. So he'll explain that there are AAA rated tranches that are the top of how the mortgage works. Then there's AA rated, then there's A rated, then there's B, and so on and so forth. But the way he explains it is that the double Bs, which are basically rubbish, are at the bottom of a house. Then you've got the A's, which are the ground, the ground floor or the first floor, and then you've got the treble A's, which are the second floor. And so if the B's go, it means the house falls down. And that's a good metaphor. It's solid, but in the film, Jared Bennett presents this to some of the other characters, which is Mark Baum, who's played by Steve Carell, and his team, as a Jenga tower. And for some reason, and it's probably because I'm a child, that explains it to me better than anything else.
Yeah, no, I know. just everyone imagining. I think everyone's like Jenga as soon as they saw it. But I can agree. It's kind of it's very difficult because it's a very difficult format. Like, it's dealing with Wall Street, it's dealing with stocks and shares, and it's dealing with the sort of the idea of the housing market and these triple A's and stuff like that. I didn't really understand what on earth he was talking about, because I think if you're not part of that world, if you're not part of the finance system, if you're not very mathematically educated, like I keep repeating I am not, it's very difficult to understand. But I did like that they did that thing where, and to explain what, these all these things are, it's Margot Robbie in a bath, and it's all this. I thought that was really good, because it does, it kind of almost, not to say it does, but it dumbs it down for you in a sense where you go, this is it, and this is it. And you go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Whereas in the book, I was like, I have no idea what I'm listening or talking about. I don't know what I'm reading. I don't know what he's talking about. It's only going over it a few times that you kind of understand what he's talking about. But immediately when you saw it in the film, you were like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh, okay, I get it. Which I think is fantastic. And that's why I think the film does very much work, because there's the underlying narration, which is Jared, played by Ryan Gosling, where he does sort of, it sort of gives it the gift of the Wall Street gap, but he also manages to keep the audience with him going, right, have you got this? So you know what you're talking about. I did also like sort of the elements where they just looked at the camera like, this isn't how we met, or this isn't how we found, the housing pamphlet, or this isn't how we did this isn't how we met. I found out from this, but, this is how we wanted to make the film. I thought that was fantastic, because it's obviously going to be dramatized. It's obviously going to be different from how it actually happened, because films aren't reality.
They're not.
Yeah. Oh no.
What?
But the element that they just looked at camera and broke the fourth wall and were like, this isn't how it's done, but it's dramatized, so we're going to, this is the actual truth. I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was really good. And that kept that almost, this is a film, but again, it did actually happen kind of feel, where you are, you're laughing. But it does that thing which a lot of, I feel, non-fiction films sort of do, is where it's very light-hearted at the start, and it's very like, hey, we're all going to make money, and hey, this is what's going to happen. And obviously there's that undertone of, we're betting on the economy crashing, which is obviously not very good. But I think the idea of Steve Carell's character, which was Mark Baum, was fantastic, because he sort of was the only one, really, well, one of the main ones, who was actually just going, we're betting on the economy collapsing, we're betting on people losing their homes, and it's sort of what Brad Pitt's character, which was Ben Rickard, it was based on Ben Hockett in the book, was that, they're going, we won, we're high-fiving and all this, and he turns around and is like, we've bet on people losing their houses, we're betting on people who we've gone and met who are now homeless. And it's then that sudden that wall sort of hits you, and you're like, this actually happened. Like, there are people that are still affected by it, and the things that are still going on about it. So I just think that was a sort of a home hitter, really, for me, that, as much as it's all, hey, it's all fun and it's based on a real film, you are like, people really did suffer for this, and we've got a film out of it. So, we kind of with Mark Baum, on the sense where we're just like, people are evil, and the whole system's corrupt, and yet we're, they're the ones that are making the money off it. So, but it's Wall Street, as much as I keep saying that, it's that thing, isn't it, of it's that pedestal where it's people are just essentially gambling. I'll bet very calculated and good gambles most of the time, but then there are times where it's, I've heard this off someone, which is what the whole thing is Mark Baum hears it or finds out about what Jared's up to, and then makes the bet on it. And you're like, and then they admittedly are like, oh, he's wrong, because it's got to this time, and it's this year, a year or two later, and it's not hit yet, it's still not going. They're having to pay out about it, so they're having to pay millions, even billions of dollars, and then it finally hits, and it's just like, it's that realization of, we've won all this money, but all these people are suffering.
Yeah, and the scene, one of the very last scenes of the film, is Mark Baum and talking to Jeremy Strong's character, Vinnie Daniel, who's been saying pretty negative things throughout the film, and you're very much with Vinny about whether they're finally going to sell their part in the subprime market. And it's a really subtle scene in the sense that it's just the two of them on the phone. Some of them, the three of Mark's employees, Danny, Porter, and Vinny, are sitting on the steps outside, probably on Wall Street, I think. And Vinny's talking to Mark on the phone and saying, okay, we probably need to sell now because everybody's sold except us. Otherwise, we're going to lose our money. And Steve Carell looks so depressed. And you're right there with him because you realise, yes, he was right. But that does not make him feel good. It makes him feel like the worst person in the world because he is very much of the feeling that nobody knew what the hell they were doing. And this, although it may make them idiots, the fact that he bet against them and they didn't listen to him does not make him moral. And he has to sort of reconcile that with himself. And you're not sure whether he does. And his character goes through a lot of personal stuff in the film. And they've changed things from how the character is based on Steve Eisman, who in the book, and they've changed things of how he is in that in the book he lost his son, and in the film they changed it at Steve Eisman's request, and they changed it to that his brother had committed suicide, which is still obviously very upsetting and very dark, and still takes the Mark Baum character on a very interesting arc because it's not a redemptive arc. He does open up to his wife, Cynthia, played by Melissa Tomei, but it's not redemptive in the same way that a lot of films like this would be, I think. I think they do try and stick to the idea that very few people went to jail over this, that the world is not fixed, that the system is still broken, and the US just bailed out the banks and the world just bailed out the banks, and the same people are sitting in Wall Street, are sitting in the London's financial district, doing the same thing, to the extent that the text at the end says that they've just come up with a new name for CDOs. And it makes you so angry because you learn the lesson along with these people who were right all the time and got put through hell by other traders for it, and by their investors and themselves actually, because they didn't know whether they were right or not. And then it gets to the point where they learn the lesson and they back down, and Christian Bale's character Michael Burry, he only invests on stocks on water now. That's all he does, and it's a commodity that everybody will always need. But the rest of them have made so much money, and a couple of them are still running their businesses, like Cornwall Capital is still going, but one of them's left, and a few of them just aren't doing anything anymore because they don't need to. But it's that they learned the lesson, they knew they were right. Wall Street was wrong, has found out it was wrong, tried to bet against the market too late, and then has been allowed to continue.
Yeah, it's a difficult because it's that moment where, like you said, Mark finds out, he's like they're literally on the steps of the company being like, we really need to sell, and he looks so world weary, and he looks so tired, and he just looks like he's about to give up. And yeah, it's like they keep going. They're all still there, well, not all of them, obviously some of them have gone, like, but the element of the two lads who set up the Brownfield Capital, or as it's Cornwall Capital. Yeah. It's they just keep going. Like, well, obviously one of them leaves and obviously has had enough and is like, okay, I'm just going to go and raise a family and live my life and do my own thing. But the other one, it's kind of like, it's the whole idea is that Wall Street is a drug. It's the addiction of gambling, because it is. That's, like I said, it is calculated and it's methodical, and it's they've really thought about what's going on and stuff like that. But
supposedly.
Yeah, like it's the idea that people have got tips at the end of the day, that they've gone, oh, this company's going to be amazing, so we're going to bet on that, and you go, yeah, of course I need however many shares in that. But the problem is that they it really does show the world in which it's just like, it's, oh, we make these gambles, but we make loads of money no matter what happens. We make loads of money, it's all going to be fantastic, and hey, we live the lifestyle, we are young, rich, successful guys, or girls and stuff like this. And you're just sort of shaking your head at the end of the film, where they're just like, they've come up with the new name of the CDOs, but they're basically exactly the same. And you're just there going, how is this still going on? Like, why is our system so corrupt and so deluded that something that wrecked the economy, especially in America and and a lot of other places, that they're still trying to do the same thing? They've got, the housing bubble was the thing that, well, was the straw that broke the camel's back. As soon as that popped, everything popped. And yet they're trying to start it all up or carry it on again in 2016. And it's just like, would you not have thought, we've learned, we've got the technology, we've got the theory, we've learned the lesson, so we're going to try and rectify it and make sure it doesn't happen again. And yet it's just doing it over and over and over again. And it's just you sort of, as an outsider, you sort of think, what are these people in Wall Street thinking? Like, there's, I couldn't have think of a more, like, sort of worse or disastrous career to go in. Like, yeah, of course it would pay a lot and stuff like that, but what if you get it wrong? That's the crashing, the crushing thud that comes down and ends it all. Like, all those banks that are laughing at them at the start, being like, well, what? Yeah, sure, okay. If the housing bubble pops, yeah, sure. And it's just that arrogance that it's just like, as soon as it's suddenly like, oh no, it actually is going right, and yeah, the housing crisis is going right down, and everything, the bubble has popped. Oh, suddenly they're all too busy, and it's all a bit like, oh, we don't really know. Well, maybe we can. I don't know, and stuff like this. It's suddenly then the cocky, confident attitude is suddenly gone. And it's the panic and the, oh god, what have we done, and what's happening has kind of set in. And it's just it's you sort of are with Mark Bourne, where you're just like, how can this be happening? Like, why are we doing this? And then it's still going on. Like, it's an interesting sort of like take on it. Like, I think the character of Michael Burry, who's actually, that is his real name, because pretty much all the names are changed, is himself. Like, it's the same name, it's the same guy. They sort of, like, they sort of don't, they look at him as a man, really, but they don't touch, like, they touch on the idea that he's got this artificial left eye at the start. I won't really think in the film that they talk so much about his Asperger's. That I think in the book they talk about it.
I think that's an interesting point to bring up, actually, because Christian Bale does an interesting job with the Asperger's, and it's difficult because it's still not a very well understood affliction, as autism isn't. It's on the same spectrum, but there's a lot we don't necessarily understand about it. And Christian Bale does do the lack of eye contact thing, but there's a couple of points where I noticed him sort of talking to himself, and I don't recognise that as an Asperger's thing. That's maybe my ignorance, and for which I apologise if that's true, but it made him feel maybe slightly schizophrenic rather than afflicted with Asperger's.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of occasions where Jared Vennett speaks to himself as well, as if he's rehearsing lines. So it's maybe just that he's talking it through with himself, and that's just part of who Mike Burry is. And yes, you're right, they don't change Mike Burry's name. And I've read a little thing about Michael Lewis and his reaction to Mike Burry and Christian Bale's portrayal of Mike Burry, and says, yeah, he is Mike Burry. There's very little difference. Like, if he walked in those board shorts and that t-shirt, I would think that's Michael Burry. That's not Christian Bale. They do change it slightly, though, because the reason that Michael Burry gets so into this in the book is presented as part of his Asperger's. He discovers it later during the crisis, whereas in the film he knows about it all along, and they don't really feature his family at all. You hear his wife's voice and you see a photo. But it's through finding out about his son's Asperger's that he finds out about his own in the book. And he's not a drummer in the book, as far as I can remember. He takes up guitar when he's disillusioned with the finance thing, and it's not even that he wants to necessarily play guitar. He just needs a new obsession. And so the drumming in the film, whilst making some quite intense scenes and quite frustrating, showing his frustration with the financial sector and with himself and with his inability to deal with these social situations and present himself in the way that he wants to present himself, it's a very useful device, but I'm not sure that it adds to the character. It just makes him more annoying.
Yeah, like I think if you hadn't have, because I watched the film with someone who hadn't read the book, and they did have to sort of be like, is he supposed to be like that? Because they don't really touch on the fact that they don't, not that you have to say, but I think for the audience who hasn't read the book, it's difficult to see because they don't touch on it. They don't touch on the son's autism, and they don't touch Asperger's, and they don't touch on Michael Burry's Asperger's. Like they don't really in the film. I mean,
they do very briefly. They mention it at the beginning, I think, and then don't mention it again.
Oh, okay. I might have missed that. But I feel that as some people who have probably not read the book going into it, you probably wouldn't realise that he's on the he's got Asperger's, and that they might just be like, well, God, this guy's really, really weird. I did think that the drumming maybe would have, they put the drumming in there, that he took up drumming and said he was a drummer instead of doing the guitar, because it's sort of the idea of that beat and that the rapidness of like what drumming is, and like that thing that people do it. I don't know, but I feel that did go well than the guitar, because I think the guitar is something that takes a long time and it's very delicate and it's methodical, and again, it could have been like a comparison to Wall Street, but I feel that the drumming did help, that it goes with the sort of fast-paced nature of what Wall Street is. So I feel that did work. I did find it interesting of Karen Gillan's character, who literally popped out of nowhere. I was like, oh look, it's the girl from it's Amy Pond from Doctor Who. How exciting that she's in there. But that she was she was what was it? She was a worker for the Securities and Exchange Commission. Yeah. And yet when people were trying to talk to her, she's like, oh, I'm here to try and find a job. And it's just like the people that are supposed to be trying to look out for problems like this and make sure that stuff like this doesn't happen are so deluded with the idea of, oh, fancy parties and so much money, and oh, these guys are so attractive and stuff like this. And yet it's just like, you're supposed to be there to helping stop the problem, and yet you're wanting to be part of the problem, was just hilarious, because it's the element of I'm not saying it is, but it is a young person's game as what they show it as, is that sort of the older characters like Mark Baum, and Michael Burry, and maybe a little bit of Gerard. Well, they've been there a long time. They're sort of the old dogs of the game, really. They sort of have been there enough to know what's going on. Whereas the people on the floor and the people at the parties and the people that they go and chat to are like these young, up and coming people that are just like, hey, life's amazing. Nothing ever can go wrong. And I think it's that dynamic of the young and the old, like the two new guys from Brownfield, who they set up a company in their garage at home, and they've come to the big city, but they have to require the help of the retired guy, which is Brad Pitt's character, which is Ben. They have to sort of get the old dog to come and play with the new sort of puppies, essentially, because they don't know what they're doing. They need all these special requirements. They can't do it on their own, so they need the old guys. And yet when suddenly they become successful, they're like one of the guys that are like, hey, high fives, hey, we're making so much money. It's they wouldn't have got there without the help of the experienced people who've been in the industry for not generations, but years. And it's just that dynamic of the old helping, like Jared helps Mark get this sale, essentially. It's like the old with the new, and the new with the old. It's kind of like the dynamic of the two worlds colliding, really, because it's not set in 1988 or anything like that, or the 70s or anything like which Wolf of Wall Street is. It's based in the 2000s, like mid to late 2000s. So it's relatively modern in a sense, and so it's that aspect of that nature is still around today. It's what we see on screen is what's going on right now, and it's that element of, oh blimey, okay, you do for a moment, you do kind of go, when is this based? Is it based in the 80s? Is it based in the 70s? Oh no, actually it's based in the new millennia. And you're like, suddenly then it hits you and you're like, wow, okay, this is quite interesting. It's kind of the same with what we covered with Spotlight, that it's all these things have happened in the last 10 years. It's not like they happened 30-40 years ago. It's that it happened, it was revealed, or it's happening now, and you're like, wow, that's kind of a hit home for me, where you're like, oh, okay, this is very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think the modernity of it does hit you sometimes, because everybody's on their cell phone and everybody's on the internet, and there's the point where Mark Baum is in what's supposed to be a debate between him and a Bear Stearns representative, where Mark basically hijacks it and gives a speech saying that the Bear Stearns guy is an idiot and is a fool, and you shouldn't listen to him. And as he's talking, as the two of them are discussing this, and the Bear Stearns guy's trying to be really jokey and have fun with it because he thinks he's talking to a madman, the Bear Stearns stock goes down and down and down, to the point where at the end most of the audience leaves because they have to get out and have to sell everything that they've got invested in Bear, because otherwise they will lose everything.
Yeah, it's kind of it's that sense of the two. It's kind of, it was a very visual, for me anyway, the visual representation of the old world and the new world, because it's sort of, Mark Baum is sort of like, yes, he's been in it for a while, but he knows what's going on. He knows that, he's not completely stupid, or he's not stupid at all, but he's not stupid to the ways of what's going on and how the world works. And then the Bear Stearns representative is just, this old, well, not old, but he's an older chap who, he's kind of, he makes the jokes, and like you could see him with a cigar and like a brandy, and it represents sort of like the old world of Wall Street, where you're like, hey, nothing's going to go wrong, it's all going to be fine, we've got loads of money. And then there's like Mark Baum with like sort of the new millennia being like, actually, you shouldn't listen to what this man is saying. It's like, sort of like that sort of idea of the two, the angel and the devil on your shoulders. It's, it's kind of the element of what is happening and what you should do. And Mark sort of, he kind of does what our generation does. He hijacks and he takes control, and he goes, well, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of the sense of, he just kind of goes, no, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to just go, no, this person's talking rubbish, but I'm just going to be like, yeah, well, you shouldn't listen to him. He's going to take the mic off. He's going to walk down to the stage. He's going to go, guys, listen to me. Whereas the Bear Stearns guy, it's kind of the old gentleman approach of just like, oh, well, we should just stand behind the podium and say what we should, and tell the people it's all going to be all right. Instead of just being like, no, we shouldn't actually tell them the truth. We're going to hide it and keep hiding it, and just, let's not let anybody worry, because we want people to come to Bear Stearns. We want to make sure Bear Stearns is an establishment. It's kind of that whole idea of that, yes, they may be working for, Mark might be working for a large company as well, but it's the sense of the establishment versus sort of, well, the modern era, really, I think, because Bear Stearns crashes, like a lot of things crashes, and you suddenly just have to realise that, well, I think the Bear Stearns guy and a lot of people in the crowd, when they suddenly see that the stock's crashing and going further and further down, that it's sort of, again, almost the visual representation that when the Bear Stearns guy's trying to take control, everyone's looking down at their mobile phones, and it's kind of, they're being distracted from what he's telling them. And it's that might just be, I was a media student, so I look into everything. I'm like, oh, look, there's a visual representation there, or this means something, this is symbolism. But you could see it because he's there trying to be standing on the stage, being the establishment. Mark's given up and just been like, drop the mic, essentially, well, literally and physically, and has walked off. And the Bear Stearns representative is trying to sort of go, no, listen to me, it's all okay, it's all going to be fine, and yet everyone's too distracted and leaves. And it's very pivotal, I feel, for me, because it is suddenly, then you realise that it's modern day, it's now, it's happening again now, and it's just, it's so frustrating. I just couldn't get my head around all these people, especially at the end, because the title cards, we did touch on this again in Spotlight, where the title cards in Spotlight didn't really hit home with us. Well, they did in a way, but they didn't also, because it's just text on a screen.
Yeah.
Whereas with the end credits with The Big Short, you were really hit by it, and you were like going, I can't believe they're doing it again. They're trying to make CEOs again. How is it you sort of are more frustrated? And I don't know. I don't really know why that hit us more, but it did.
I think it's because the film presents itself very differently to Spotlight, in that it has a lot of jerky camera work, it has a lot of cutaway gags, it has a lot of sort of almost slideshows where it's moving you through the history and moving you through the years, because it skips time a couple of times. And I think that's part of the cleverness of this film, is that it does jerk you around, and there are slightly off camera angles, and there are continuity errors, particularly with the Jenga tower. It's built at certain points, it's knocked down at certain points, and it's rebuilt. But I think that's deliberate. I don't think they would have done that by mistake, because it's so obvious. And there's a point where, and this sounds really nitpicky, where Margot Robbie picks up the champagne glass, then in the next shot it's down and she picks it up again. But I think it's deliberate, because it's almost as if the film is trying to say the world is broken, the system is broken, and the people using it are not good at using it. These guys who have come in and done this really unusual thing by looking at the system. There is actually a quote that Jared says, they did something that nobody else was doing. They looked. And it's that simple. And there's the bit in the middle of the film where various characters are going around neighbourhoods with real estate agents and all of this, and seeing deserted houses, and everybody saying, oh yeah, it's just the gully, we're just in a little dip at the moment, it's nothing to worry about. But it's the classic thing of, we underestimate disaster. The film and the book both say that, and they are very right, in that we cannot possibly predict what is coming. We cannot know at what point a market will suddenly turn, someone will discover something, or they won't. And our inability to predict the future means that betting on a bet on top of another bet is completely foolish.
Yeah, it just makes me want to tear your hair out most of the time, because you do get very frustrated, because it's so true, in the sense of that the obvious essential glitches in the film really do represent that the system is falling apart, like the world is falling apart almost. And I think I just get so frustrated with this film, because there's people, in a good way, obviously, in a good way, but that everything was so obvious to the world, and no one did anything, because everyone was more preoccupied with trying to make money for themselves. They weren't trying to look out for people. But then again, even the people that did look, they didn't try and I think they tried to report it, but people were just like, no, we're fine. People were just so like putting your fingers in your ears, being like, la 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 la, we're not listening, it's fine. That it was just so frustrating, because even the guys who were betting for the house market and the house bubble to pop were trying to stop it. They were trying to go and sort things out. They were trying to go to the Standard and Poor's Financial Services and say, look, this is what's happening. And they were in on it as well. They were making problems and issues as well. And you're just like, how has this happened in a society? We should, we've evolved from the caveman. We've come from making just fire. We can make, sort of virtual reality goggles now. We can do all sorts of things. And yet we still, we can't even sorting out housing crisis or anything like that. We can't sort out economic crisis. We can't put our sort of collective brains together and go, we need to get this sorted. We need to get people out of trouble. Because at the end of the day, the poor people suffered and the rich people became rich. And it was that, no one really cared. Only the people that suffered cared. Everyone else who won money were just like, hey, brilliant. Like there was those, when they went to, I believe it was when they went to Miami, and there were the two real estate guys who were just like, hey, we're so rich, hey, but it's brilliant. It's
guys. I hate those guys.
They were just like, oh, we're all going to be fine, it's all okay. And then they were seen at the end trying to get, they've lost all the cool, they've lost the tan, they've lost the cool hair, they've lost the cool suits. They're in like, a blazer and a shirt and maybe some jeans or something, looking around trying to like find a job, passing around the CVs. And it really is how the mighty have fallen. But unfortunately, a lot of the mighty are still rising, and you're just like, you want them to get comeuppances. You want them to be like, we're sorry for what we did, we're sorry for the pain we caused, we're sorry for everything, and the guilty parties be taken away. But they weren't, and it's going to happen all over again, and it's just depressing. It's a very depressing ending, really, because only certain people saw the consequences, but they'll probably be picked up and it'll be fine. It's the poor people who've lost their houses, the people who are struggling, the people who've got like all those different loans. They're all gonna fall. Like, I think it was the stripper at what was it, 5 houses, and it was just like,
and the condo.
We must not remember the condo, and it's just that you could see the shock of like, are you kidding? Like, I've put everything into this and I'm about to lose it all. It was just shocking.
Yeah, and it's part of when they go to Standard & Poor's and realise the reason that they're rating them is for money. Because if they don't rate them AAA, then they'll go to another rating agencies like Moody's. And when Karen Gillan, her character, is talking about the SEC and saying, oh yeah, we've got no budget, we don't police anymore, we just hang around. And it's when you defund these regulatory bodies and when you take away their power that the banks just go, oh, okay, we've got carte blanche now, we can do what we want. And there is a very interesting couple of scenes where they discuss the difference between stupidity and illegality and say they're basically the same thing. And I think to a certain extent they are, because the scene that you mentioned when they're talking to those two guys and one of them says to the other one, oh yeah, the people I deal with don't have bad enough credit for him to deal with them. It's the fact that he is dealing with the people who have literally no money, and yet he's giving them a mortgage that they can't possibly afford as soon as it goes up to the higher rating. And they can't see that by giving out all of this money, it means that there's no money left at home. They're basically doing the same thing that they're asking the mortgage payers to do with their bank's money. And they can't see it. They just can't see the fact that they're doing it wrong. And it's not necessarily that they're evil. It's just that they keep making the same mistake. And that doesn't mean that they shouldn't go to jail by any stretch, because it's clear that this is morally repugnant, and actually the idea that the whole system was based on fraud is brought up a number of times. But for some reason, barely anything happened. The film mentions that one banker went to jail for losing his bank so much money, when actually $5 trillion disappeared.
Yeah, it's that element of, there's going to be a fall guy, and they'll obviously have picked someone that's of no consequence, that's just some guy that they can pin it on and be like, yeah, he lost us all this money. I'm sure he probably lost a bit of money, but it's like, where are the other people? Not one banker lost $5 trillion. Let's be honest. If he did, then he's obviously got his fingers in a lot of pies if he's doing it. But it was like that no one really suffered in the sense of up in the hierarchy. Like, yeah, the banks and the sort of investment companies who'd invested money lost money. But, and there's obviously some retribution because some banks did shut down and some investment companies did shut down, but not all of them, and only a few of them did. Whereas it was something like, I can't even remember, it was something like, was it 200,000 people lost their homes?
Yeah, an astronomical number of people.
It was something like that, or something like when it first initially hit, and they've been, it's still now, how many years? What was 2007? I think it happened. So it's something like
almost a decade.
Almost, yeah, nearly 10, 15 maybe years later. It's still affecting people, still having to get over it. People are still having to pay off loans off of all these mortgages, and it's just staggering that something like this could happen. And you do get that from the book. You do get that there's all these things did happen, but it was very methodical in the sense of what happened, how it happened, why it's happening, and it does follow what all the Mark Baum and Jared and Michael and the lads from Brownfield and Ben, what they all did, and it does sort of sort of say that, but I don't really think it highlights the damage that the film sort of portrays, because I think they did mention sort of what happened in the end, but very briefly. I think it kind of just cut off. It was like, oh, and then the bubble burst and that's what happened. Whereas in the film they were kind of like, these are how many people lost their homes, these were, this is kind of the ramifications of what happened, and now they're trying to reinvent the CDOs, and you're like, but and you're just kind of coming away from it. Like, even people who haven't read the book will go and see the film and go, I'm so frustrated at the end of it, and how is our system? But the problem is that such an eye-opening film, and with what's happening now, that they're still trying to pass off the CDOs, nothing's going to happen. No. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to change the system. It's going to happen again, and when that crash happens again, they'll look for somebody else to blame. They won't blame themselves. They won't take responsibility. They won't do anything. And that's, I think, what is, you sort of do walk away with your sort of head held low, and your heart saddened, because you know that it's going to happen again, be it now, and I think as a person, because we're in our mid-20s, and it's kind of like it's our future that they're going to screw over. And it's like, these people who, and it will be up and coming guys who've just come out of university that are like, hey, I want to make some money. And it's like, yeah, but you're gambling on your own future and the rest of your generation's future. And I think nobody realizes that, and that's what's more terrifying about the whole thing. It's very terrifying about what happened, and it's upsetting what happened, but it's more terrifying to think, hey, look, they're trying it again, and it's going to happen with our generation, with our future, with our money and our houses. And you're like, and nothing is going to be done. And that's what's more the frustrating element of it, and the element that makes you go, oh, great, fantastic, that's our future. But But we should probably discuss what we thought was better. I think we probably are very, very unanimous with our discussions, but we should talk about it anyway. Like, I just feel the book was a bit too. It was a bit like a manual to Wall Street. I felt it was. It was a bit too. All the terms. It didn't really explain itself a lot. It just kind of just went, this is what happened. Bang, 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 bang. And you sort of have to try and keep up with it. Whereas I feel like the film explained it a lot easier. Like you said with the house sort of metaphor, I felt the Jenga metaphor, it did sort of make it a lot, the symbolism of it and having a Jenga piece did make it a lot easier. But what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the book tries to explain itself. There are asterisk little bits that try to explain what it means, but I think, and this is a little bit contradictory in that I feel like there are points where the book, it could have done with talking down to me, because I'm not familiar with this stuff, but I don't like being talked down to, so it's a bit of a contradiction in terms. But I think the book assumes that you have a level of understanding that not everybody has, whereas the film, because it's more mass media and it's looking for a wider audience, goes further in its attempts to explain, which I really, really appreciate, and it does it in a very non-condescending way. Even if it brings in the celebrities, the way that they discuss it is not really dumbed down. They're just using it in a way that everybody can understand it, and that doesn't mean that it's dumb. It just means that it's talking to you in an accessible way. And I think we often conflate the dumbness with accessibility, which we shouldn't necessarily do. And I think the book definitely left me with the reaction of, huh? Whereas the film left me a reaction with, grr, because I understood it.
Yeah, it's so true. Because you were even halfway through, I just remember just looking up, being like, "What is this? What's this all mean?" And it is true that it does try and explain, but the problem is, that's the problem. I think not everybody's going to pick up the book. I think like you said, you've got to have a level of understanding, or you've got to be sort of maybe open to the mind of what Wall Street is. You're not going to go reading it thinking, oh, this is going to be like Winnie the Pooh. It's going to be really easy. It's going to be,
the big Winnie.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be like, oh, well, this is A, B, and C. It's going to be like a whole blooming diagram. So I think going into it, you would know what to expect. So I think that's probably why Michael Lewis didn't, not dumb it down, because I suppose that's the wrong word to use, but sort of like made it sort of in million like layman's terms. So it's kind of like you could go, oh, okay, I just need a quick caption. Like a lot of people like myself, and I think probably yourself, were like, we just need it a little bit, like just cut it down a bit, cut it down. But which is what they did in the film, was they cut it down. They didn't dumb it down. They just put it in layman's terms. That's sort of how we should come across it, is they did put it in layman's terms so we could all people, even if they didn't, because I think a lot of people would go, oh, Christian Bale, Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling and Brad Pitt are in a film, let's go and see it, I'm sure it's gonna be really good. And I think they'll sit down and go, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is a lot different to, like a romantic comedy, or, it's something, it's similar to like Moneyball. Like Moneyball, you wouldn't have gone to, I don't think you should have gone to see it unless you maybe understood what it was about. Because it's, at the end of the day, that is a film about baseball, but about the logistics and the sort of the schematics and the mathematics behind baseball. So this is the same. This isn't a Wolf of Wall Street film or a book where you just sit down and go, hey, it's going to be parties and champagne and a bit of betting here and there. It's going into the methodical and mathematical side of Wall Street, which I think is a good sense of the film, because I don't think really because there was the whole Michael Douglas film Wall Street, which did maybe touch on it, but it didn't go into the extent of what it does here and how many people are involved.
No, and it doesn't show you spreadsheets, and as everybody knows, we love spreadsheets.
We do love spreadsheets. They are fantastic. So I'm gonna have to say the film was better, which is very, the book was better last time, and I've been a lot of the book was better for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to come down on the film was better, just because it made me feel like I understood it more. And that's not necessarily a bad thing that I didn't understand the book, because it says you're in good company. Nobody understands this except the people who bet against it. But I think we do. I think we're coming down on that the book was not as good as the film in this. You may disagree. If you do, you need to let us know via Twitter with hashtag the book was better. If you agree with us, that's great. You're correct. So you can let us know with hashtag the film is better. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, and we will be back next week with a special episode about true crime.
Yes, we're branching out. We're doing something a bit different, because we were upping the ante by putting non-fiction books on here, which we were enjoying doing because it's something different. But next week we're going to be doing a sort of a genre topic. We're going to be talking about true crime because it's come up a lot. Obviously, we're not going to talk about it now, but it's come up a lot recently with certain Netflix documentaries and certain podcasts and certain films. So we wanted to sort of basically open that umbrella and sort of talk about everything. We want to talk about maybe things that have happened maybe 20 years ago, and maybe things that have happened now, and how we look at true crime as sort of a society. So that's going to be next week. So it's going to probably be a little bit longer, because at the moment we're sort of hitting around about the 40 minute mark. That might go on a little bit longer, but hopefully we'll do it justice. We want to do it justice. That's why we're going to do our research. We've been doing our research, and we want to do our research. So that's going to be next week. But we hope you've enjoyed this episode. We certainly have enjoyed sort of researching it as much as we could. We've sort of almost burst our brains from having to read the book and understand it all. But do let us what let us know if you want us to do anything in particular, and maybe if you want us to talk about anything for the next week's genre episode. We are on Twitter at Morlock Me, and you can also find us. We're on YouTube as well. And we will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. So thank you.